community gathered to protest against police brutality. Thousands of people, led by a grieving mother of a 17-year-old who was shot and killed by police on Tuesday. Police initially said he'd failed to cooperate when ordered to stop in the Paris suburb of Nanterre. His family and friends paid tribute to Nahel at the march.
He is a young man. He's very kind. He's not evil or a hooligan. What the media are saying about him is not true. His mum raised him well. His grandmother we know here around the neighborhood. She's kind and helpful. She loves everyone. The young man left us for nothing. We're not contradicting the state. We are not contradicting the legal or police procedure. Yes, he was driving a car without a license. He tried to flee, but he should not be killed.
Police said the 17-year-old drove the car at one of the officers, but this video appears to contradict the police version of what happened. It showed an officer pointing his weapon through the window and appearing to fire at close range before the car rolls off and crashes to a stop.
En l'état des investigations et des éléments recueillis,
in view of the state of the investigation and the details collected, the prosecution considers that the legal conditions for the use of the weapon are not met.
President Emmanuel Macron held a crisis meeting denouncing both the shooting and the riots that followed as unjustifiable.
Clearly, the emotion that comes with the death of a young man calls for contemplation and calm, and it's what the government has constantly called for. I think this is what should continue to guide the next hours and the tributes.
Nevertheless, his words haven't stopped thousands of people from protesting what many say has become a systematic zero-tolerance policy carried out by French police, especially against those from poor and minority communities. Officials are deploying tens of thousands of police across France, including 5,000 in the capital, Paris alone. The police officer involved in the shooting has been arrested and charged. The 17-year-old victim is the second person to be killed in such circumstances this year and the 15th in a year and a half. Many are hoping that calls for justice can finally be answered as quickly as possible. Sara, Khairat, Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera's Natasha Butler has been speaking to demonstrators in Nanterre, near Paris, and a short while ago she was caught up in the unrest.
Well, this is the neighbourhood where Nahel lived, and sitting on top of the van is Nahel's mother. You can see her there with a ponytail, and she is leading this tribute to her 17-year-old son as commemorative march. And when you look at her, she really goes through all the emotions. Sometimes she looks obviously very touched because there are so many people here. Sometimes she looks as if she is on the verge of tears because everyone has come here to pay tribute to her son that was killed during a police traffic check not far from here, just a few hundred meters away from where this march is taking place.
It's important to be here. The situation's lasted too long. The same things keep happening. In truth, people are sick of it.
It could have been my son. I'm of North African origin, and it's not the first time this sort of thing has happened. We are so fed up.
What's happening now is exactly the sort of thing that tends to inflame the situation because the police have fired a number of tear gas canisters right into the middle of this crowd as they were coming to the end of their walk. People coughing, a lot of children were there, a lot of families. People are walking away feeling furious that the police has done this. What the police are trying to do, of course, is disperse the crowd. But once again, people are saying this just shows how out of touch the police are to be doing this on a day when people had come to pay tribute to this teenager. Natasha Butler, Al Jazeera, Nanterre.
All right, we're now joined by Natasha Butler. Natasha, you're able to be with us live after you recorded that. What's happening now in Nanterre, Natasha?
Well, at the end of the march, as you saw there, people were gathered, well, on this square where I'm standing in the middle of Nanterre, and they were ready to celebrate, ready to commemorate, come together when the police fired the tear gas into the centre. And I have to say, you know, being here, it was really quite shocking because there were families there, very young children, and people were here to be peaceful. And the problem is that then it really then, of course, we saw unrest and violence. We saw some people smashing up buildings. There are buildings just out of shot there that are smashed up. We saw fires being lit, another car being set fire to just behind me. And here, there's a bit of debris, some stones all over the place because there were a few clashes between some of those protesters and police. But it didn't have to be like that, say many people, because it was a peaceful march. It was a moment of joy and commemoration. It shouldn't have ended that way, but people felt so frustrated and furious that anger boiled over, and many are saying that the police handled the end of that commemoration in the wrong way, and that's the sort of thing that happens over and again, they say.
Natasha, the French Justice Minister said that all of this is about one policeman, not about the police force as a whole. What is the status of that police officer who opened fire on Nahel?
At this stage, we know very little indeed about that police officer, only that he was taken into custody after he shot at the teenager earlier this week. We also know that the prosecutor here in the Paris suburb of Nanterre has asked that he be charged with voluntary homicide, not involuntary homicide, but voluntary homicide. So for the time being, he is being kept in custody. That's what we understand. It will last for a few days, and then the process, of course, the legal process will continue. And what authorities are saying is, of course, justice will be served, and they're calling for calm whilst that process is underway.
Natasha Butler reporting from Nanterre near Paris. We've been following developments throughout the day. Thank you very much, Natasha. Now, ENB is the founder and spokesperson for the anti-police violence collective Désarmons-les. In English, that means let's disarm them, let's disarm the police. You're joining us from Lyon. The French Justice Minister says all of this is about just one or two policemen, as I was telling Natasha, not the police force as a whole. How do you feel about that?
I disagree totally. It's like it's already 20 years we're saying that it's not the problem of one or two cops who are like problematic. It's like really a problem of systemic violence, systemic racism inside the police. It's like also the police is like the police unions and the police in general is like it's a state within the state since now more than 20 years. So we cannot say that one policeman is responsible for this. We have a huge increase since several years, and especially under the Macron regime, we have like a huge increase of the police murders every year. We went from 20 to 25 murders every year before Macron, and now we are around 30 to 35 murders every year.
And why is that, in your view? Why is that?
I think there's many factors, and one thing is that we never faced like our colonial history. And it's also the consequence of 50 years of neoliberal policies. It's all together. And also now we are in a very Islamophobic and authoritarian context where the government is just putting always new oil on the fire. And this can just not go through. And at the same time, the police is like, it's pushed into violence by like really public speeches that are very offensive and very authoritarian, and also at the same time like the police is constantly like more militarized, and the budgets of the army and the defense are increasing constantly, and this can only lead to such kind of violence. And also the new law, because we have this new law from 2017 that allow the cops, it's giving to the police a license to kill, and this is the main problem.
Yeah, Ian, let's focus on that a little bit. Let's drill down on that, because this is not a point of detail. It's pretty major, right? It's a law that details the rules of engagement for the police and that changed the rules of engagement as of 2017. And since that law, we have seen police discharge their firearms more often. What does the law say?
This is like, before the law, there were a long lobbying of the police to have a new law that gave them another framework for self-defense than the common people. And in 2017, they adopted finally this law that the police unions were asking for years. And in this law, it's written, it's giving a list of situations in which like the cops can open fire without being afraid or scared of being prosecuted, in fact. And this is why we call it a license to kill, because it's explaining, and if you are in this situation, you can just open fire and you will be covered, you will be protected, and you will not be prosecuted. And even in this case, when the government now is saying that the cop will be prosecuted, it doesn't mean nothing, because in the past also cops were prosecuted. It's just that they never go to court after the prosecution. And this is also a main problem. This law is embedded in the whole context of giving impunity to the cops. And this law is just very symbolic, but the whole system is made like this. And we have every year new security laws, like giving the right to the cops to make violence, to cover their faces, not to show their identification numbers, and so on. And all these measures are going with this law and this impunity context.
What would you like to actually see happen? What do you want to be done? I know you're campaigning for the police to be disarmed. There's no appetite for that within the French mainstream political parties. I know that there is some with the far left parties, but not mainstream. I mean, not Macron's party, not the Conservatives. So realistically speaking, what would you like to see happen?
The problem is, in this context, like we are in a huge lack of democratic solutions, and we are at the end of democratic illusions. So even collectives who were involved in trying to change the law, they don't believe anymore in this. So I don't know what should be like the solution, but we are one of the collectives who are asking for dismantling the police. And this was a discourse that was heard in America after the death of George Floyd. But in France, it's still very hard to speak about this kind of solution, because actually the police is acting like a criminal gang, and we have to dismantle many brigades in many cities, because there cannot be any solution without this, because we cannot calm down the police. The police is just going more and more to the far right, and we know by the election that 60% of them, they vote for the far right. So there is no solution with this police. They cannot be like a fair solution, a legal solution, if the laws are giving even more power, always more power to the police, and the police is becoming more and more far right. This is the problem. Like, we are really at the end of these democratic illusions.
All right.
And I don't know even how to answer to this question, to be honest. It's a dead end.
Yeah, well, you gave it a good shot, and you gave us a lot of context. So thank you very much for coming on the program today. Thank you for your insights and your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.